Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 196 based on novel. So let's start. Saint Woodcutter looked at the opposite side where a few devil gods had brought their proud students. Those young devil experts were all overflowing with fierce auras. Every one of them had terrifying corporeal bodies and were extremely strong. They were obviously experts that had been through life and death. He'd fought with the devils before and deeply knew the strength of this race. Purely based on corporeal body, even if the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven had the aptitude of a true god, they would still be slightly inferior. On top of that, because there were many battles in Supreme Emperor Heaven, they frequently had to fight with the devils, so it was difficult for them to form schools and academies like Eternal Peace did. They also couldn't form large-scale sects, so it was usually gods finding outstanding talents to personally teach them. There were advantages and disadvantages to doing so. The advantages were that with the personal teachings of the gods and devils, every one of them was elites with extremely powerful abilities. There were no flaws in the inheritance of paths, skills, and divine arts in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Even god-level techniques could be passed down. For example, Sanghua, she was personally taught by her father Sang Yi. The disadvantage was that one person could only learn what their master had to teach and that's it. They found it very difficult to learn other people's ultimate arts. For example, Sanghua cultivated Sang Yi's technique and divine arts, so she had never learned a divine art that he did not possess. Even if she learned it, the other party wouldn't be able to teach her as diligently as Sang Yi. Without learning the techniques and divine arts of others, one could only be skilled in a specialized area, but this resulted in the paths, skills, and divine arts of Supreme Emperor Heaven not showing any improvement. They were much inferior to those of Eternal Peace. Qin Mu was able to see that, which meant that Saint Woodcutter could naturally see it too. He looked at the youth who was still forging and couldn't help doubting himself. When I saw him in danger in the battlefield, I executed a divine art that he could comprehend, and he learned it immediately, escaping successfully. By right, this successor of mine should have unmatched talent and have cultivated the technique I had passed down to the degree of perfection, which was why he was able to comprehend my divine art in an instant. Yet why has he become so unreliable now? Could my judgment have really been wrong? At that moment, a god walked over and bowed. Heavenly Master, the 7 Stars Realms experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven are here. Saint Woodcutter looked at them and nodded gently. Let them come in. Sanghua looked around, and her eyes suddenly lit up. The one who threshes grains, that girl is called Yu-He. She's the #1 divine arts practitioner of 7 Stars Realm. Qin Mu pulled out a sword from the fire wall and examined it. The heat still wasn't there yet, so he stuffed it back in. Sanghua was beyond excited. She said to Qin Mu, Yu-He is the disciple of true god Pang Yu and has passed through the test of God Suppression Pagoda. She has slain 3 devil experts at the level of a young true devil and is acclaimed as the #1 in 7 Stars Realm. That's her, the girl who bunned up her hair so high that it looks like a small pagoda. She's very pretty. The black tiger god looked over at the girl called Yu-He who had a cold expression. She removed her earrings, bracelets, and tidied her clothes. It was evident that she was ready for a life and death struggle. She's indeed not bad, an expert, the black tiger god praised. She removed the extra accessories from her body for her movements to be unrestricted. She can be said to have been forged in hundreds of battles. The one who threshes grains, look. The top 10 divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm are all here. Wait, that's not right, there are 2 people missing. Could they have died in battle? Qin Mu focused on his forging and shook to transform into the true form of Mercury Sovereign. He drew cold water vapor to cool down the sword. He then grabbed the flying sword and poured his vital qi in. Rubbing his hands, he turned the shiny sword into a pellet. He then nodded in satisfaction. Sanghua was ineffably excited. Look, that's Xu Yao. His master is true god Yang Shuo, but he, unfortunately, died in the last fight with Fu Riluo. However, Xu Yao is indeed abnormally powerful. He has the manner of a master, and his technique is overbearing while his divine arts are fierce. What he walks is the root of the corporeal body becoming that of a saint. The black tiger god looked at Xu Yao, and saw that this youth had a calm bearing that wouldn't be alarmed even if the heaven fell. Even when faced with so many gods and devils, he didn't have a change in expression. He's much steadier than the one who threshes grains that looked around in wonder all the time. This Xu Yao is also an expert, the black tiger god praised. Xu Yao walked over. He was an extremely earnest youth, and his bearing was extraordinarily calm. The few people beside him were also extremely unordinary. Every one of them, no matter if it was a boy or girl, they all had thick murderous aura surrounding them. All of them should have just come from the battlefield. Sanghua was excited to the highest level. These people that could walk out of God Suppression Pagoda are all young experts, and each of them is legendary. That's Huang Yu over there. He has been through numerous big battles, and is known for his outstanding military service. He's also the disciple of true God Pang Yu, and was the fastest to pass through God Suppression Pagoda. It's just that his ranking is a little low, at rank 3. Qin Mu put away all the flying swords he had finished refining while stuffing all the others into Li fire to continue working non-stop. The black tiger god looked at Huang Yu, who was obviously a martial maniac. Even under such a situation, he was still cultivating. He didn't forget to execute his technique even when he was walking and clouds floated above his head. His technique was very strange, and he had already cultivated his primordial spirit. Even though he couldn't project it yet, he could already have it breathe vital qi in and out. The clouds above his head were visions formed from his primordial spirit condensing his vital qi. The cultivation of this man is extremely dense. The eyes of the black tiger god lit up, and he praised, another martial maniac, but his thoughts are very pure. He doesn't have any other thoughts besides growing stronger, so his frame of mind is naturally great. The one who threshes grains and long braid girl, you too should learn from him. Sanghua knew that he was giving her pointers and hurriedly nodded. The black tiger god looked at Qin Mu, who took out another bunch of flying swords to stab them into the fire. He smacked another one with his hammer to refine away the impurities within it. The black tiger god's complexion turned black. He looked over and her gaze landed on Qin Mu, who was busy forging his swords. She frowned slightly and asked Sanghua, "Junior sister Sanghua, this person is?" Sanghua looked at her in admiration and replied with a smile, "This is Qin Mu, he's from another world. His Qin is the Qin from threshing grains. Senior sister, you've become world famous in the battle in Shicity." His expression fell. However, Shicity still fell into the enemy's hands. The devil's abilities are indeed slightly stronger than ours. However, the divine arts practitioners of my Supreme Emperor Heaven are no weaker than the devils who are just relying on their numbers. Xu Yao walked over and gave Sanghua a gentle smile. "Sister Sanghua, you haven't entered God Suppression Pagoda yet, right? I see your abilities are also extraordinary, and have improved a lot since we last met. You will definitely be able to pass the test of God Suppression Pagoda." Sanghua's chest brimmed with pride. Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu and slightly frowned. He asked in a low voice, "This is Qin Mu who threshes the grains?" He felt helpless. He's from another world and his temper is a little weird. He came all the way here to forge. Sanghua blushed and said in a low voice, Qin Mu is very powerful. He has a gate that I've never seen before. Wherever it passes, nothing will live. He killed many experts of the devil race. He also has a moon jade eyes that killed Fu Yuxiao in one shot. His attainments in algebra are extremely high, but his medical expertise is even higher. His forging is also better than his algebra. Fu Riluo's disciple Fu Yuxiao was killed by him. Everyone was astonished and they all looked at Qin Mu only to see him still forging. He said with a calm expression, the treasures of this senior brother Qin are truly extraordinary. The others all nodded. Fu Yuxiao was famous among the younger generation as an expert of celestial being realm. For Qin Mu to be able to kill Fu Yuxiao, it had to have been due to the power of that so-called moon jade eye. It isn't entirely the credit of the treasure, since it was accomplished only because of the one who threshes grains' very high attainments in algebra. He said he had relied on algebra to calculate the next step of Fu Yuxiao to be able to shoot him. While saying that, Sanghua became less and less confident. Algebra. Everyone shook their heads, and Huang Yu said indifferently, what use is algebra? Not only will it not increase one's battle power, but it will also take up the time from cultivation. The black tiger god gave a cough and said solemnly, everyone, go and calm down your minds first. There will be fierce battles later. My lord has already fought with Fu Riluo numerous times just now, but the outcome was hard to determine, so a new idea was brought up. The younger generation shall fight to determine the ownership of Li City. We'll need to use everyone's abilities if we'll want to take back Li City. Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu, who was still forging, and said with a frown, how can we calm our minds with this senior brother forging over here? The others all nodded. The black tiger god looked at them helplessly. Please pardon him. His frame of mind isn't like yours, so he needs to rely on forging to stabilize it. Suddenly, Huang Yu's gaze fell with intensity on the other side, and his voice grew slightly hoarse. Zhehuali, Fu Riluo's proudest disciple. I've met him on the battlefield, and in the darkness, I almost died in his hands. Luckily, reinforcements came on time. Xu Yao also stared at that young devil expert. The knife on his back trembled, giving off knife cries. The young expert then said in a low voice, I've also exchanged blows with him and lost. Maybe only senior sister Yu can defeat him. His gaze landed on Zhehuali and she shook her head. I encountered him in the battlefield just now. Even though we were broken up by the battle formation after 2 moves, it was enough for me to determine his abilities. I'm not 100% confident in defeating him. You guys must be careful when fighting him. The black tiger god looked at the young expert of the devil race and was slightly stunned. Up ahead was a cultured and refined youth. Based on his appearance, one couldn't see that he was a devil at all. That's not right. He isn't a devil, but a human. The black tiger god's heart trembled slightly, and he instantly realized Zhehuali's background. He said in a low voice, he's not only the disciple of Fu Riluo, but someone from the upper bound. Xu Yao, and Huang Yu were all astonished. They wanted to ask for details, but the black tiger god leaped into the sky. He said to Saint Woodcutter, my lord, something is wrong with the origin of that Zhehuali. He's not a devil, so he should have come from the upper bound. Saint Woodcutter nodded and looked at the other side. He said solemnly, Fu Riluo, it seems you are also related to the so-called celestial heavens. This disciple of yours is from the upper bound. I wonder which high god is he the disciple of? Fu Riluo laughed loudly and said leisurely, Zhehuali has a stable foundation, and his devil technique is right behind mine. His abilities are outstanding, and he is the disciple that I think the most highly of. However, your guess isn't wrong, and his background is great. He has another master, and you also know him. This person is the knife god who calls himself Wushuang. You've exchanged blows before. Saint Woodcutter's expression sunk, and he nodded. Divine Knife Lua Wushuang, the top general of Spirit Elite Guards. He's indeed an old friend. Never would I have thought that you would actually become related to him. The ears of Qin Mu, who had been forging, suddenly twitched, and he placed the iron hammer in his hand. He raised his head and asked Sang Hua, "What guards?" "What Wushuang?" "Spirit Elite Guards, Lua Wushuang." "You," he said indifferently. "My master true god Pang Yu had mentioned him." Lua Wushuang is a broken arm knife god of the ancient times, a true god with very powerful knife skills. He only has one arm, but his knife skills have reached perfection. Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly recalled the night 40,000 years ago, and the Lua Wushuang of the Spirit Elite Guards that he had encountered. That night, he had stood on the chest to cover for the escape, and cut off one of Lua Wushuang's arm. Could the two Lua Wushuangs be the same person? Qin Mu hurriedly looked at Zhehuali, and Xu Yao smiled as he inquired, "Senior brother Qin, who threshes the grains, why aren't you forging anymore?" Qin Mu didn't answer, and Zhehuali on the opposite side immediately felt his gaze. He raised his head, and their eyes met. Qin Mu's gaze landed on Zhehuali's back, where he saw a long knife that was very demonic and evil. There was an eye on its hilt. That eye suddenly opened and stared at Qin Mu. Zhehuali saw Qin Mu's face and was slightly stunned. His expression filled with disbelief, and he took out a scroll from his chest. He examined it and took another look at Qin Mu before suddenly smiling in delight. Qin Mu's gaze was fixated on that demon knife when he said solemnly, "Sister Sang Hua, if I tell you that the arm of Divine Knife Lua Wushuang had been cut off by me, will you believe me?" Divine Knife Lua Wushuang's arm was cut off by you. Everyone in the surroundings found it extremely preposterous. Even the most stable Xu Yao couldn't help bursting into laughter. "Senior brother Qin, who threshes the grains, just focus your mind on forging." Qin Mu looked away, but his expression became strangely serious. Suddenly, Yu He, Huang Yu, Xu Yao, Sang Hua, and the rest moved a step away from Qin Mu, bewildered. For that instant, they felt that this youth forging beside them had suddenly become a sword that was about to be unsheathed. Light rays had been about to burst forth in all directions. His acute spirit was threatening, but it was left in the sword sheath without being drawn. The youth had moved because of natural instinct, avoiding a terrifying fighting spirit and murderous intent. Clang, clang. The sound of metal being beaten rang out as Qin Mu went back to the smelting table, focusing on hammering his flying swords. Everyone couldn't help doubting that if it was their senses that had went wild for a moment. Meanwhile, on the other side, a female devil beside Zhehuali took a glance and said in astonishment, "The person in your painting looks like that brat forging on the other side." Zhehuali rolled up the painting and put it away. He said indifferently, "My master has been looking for him for a long time. He said that the reason his knife skills reached such a level was all thanks to him. Old man executed his sword skill for me to see before I left for the lower bound and gave this painting to me. He wanted me to find that person and execute his knife skills to show him." The female devil couldn't help shuddering as she chuckled. "Your master seems to be quite concerned about him. His order for you is to make this forging brat see how powerful his knife skills are. I can feel the hatred in your master's heart, but there should also be a hint of respect. However, that forging brat is only a youth, so how could he have caught the attention of your master? This I do not know." Zhehuali's gaze landed on Qin Mu. "Just a few months ago, master even crossed realms to contact me, saying that the person he wanted to find has appeared. He asked me to take a trip to that world to look for him. However, with the incoming big battle, I didn't have the time to go that world. Never did I expect to encounter him here. He let out a shaky breath and added in a low voice, for the knife god to view him so highly, I'd like to meet him very much. Qin Mu, who was forging, revealed no emotions, and just continued to forge his flying swords without a care. However, Jawali could still sense that his gaze was making this youth uncomfortable. When his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body, he could clearly see the youth adjusting his posture. Jawali smiled, unable to quell his excitement. The eye on the demon knife also became excited and rotated a few rounds, increasing in size and becoming bloody. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice rang out. Heavenly Master, since everyone is already here, let us begin. Should we set any rules? Rules? Where are the rules in a life and death struggle? Fu Riluo laughed loudly, and in the courtyard, the black spear trembled. The plaza cracked, and explosions came from the ground as ravines spread out in all directions. The footing of Qin Mu and the rest instantly became unstable. They hurriedly roused their vital qi. Saint Woodcutter raised his eyebrows, and the huge axe also shook to fight with the devil spear. The collision of the two divine weapons suddenly tore the space in the center of the plaza and stretched it. Among the world-shaking explosions, the expressions of Qin Mu and the rest changed drastically. The land under their feet suddenly rose high up. They couldn't even stand with two legs if they wanted to keep them, but had to jump on only one, because of the expanding land. The terrain of the plaza under their feet had changed. In an instant, mountains had been raised, and the distance between them was still rapidly growing greater. The power of the two divine weapons collided and actually stretched the plaza, as though there was a boundless power creating mountains from nothing at all. Ravines crossed each other and mountains rose and stretched into the distance. This kind of magnificent power made the youths look up in awe. Qin Mu looked at the transformations in front of him in astonishment. The flat plaza was like the blue sea turning into mulberry fields. It was undergoing transformations that could only happen after hundreds of thousands, or even millions of years in just a short while. This was the mighty force of gods and devils, the power that mortals couldn't achieve. Only now did he see how much power a true god controlled. It was a power that Xing'an, a god that was pieced together, could never hope of possessing. For Fu Riluo to be able to block Saint Woodcutter, his abilities are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu's heart shook when he sensed his flying swords. There was a portion of them that had been being calcined in the Li fire and Devil fire, and he hadn't summoned them back in time. He immediately called them to himself, and the flying swords rose in the distance. They were over 20 miles from him, but he immediately saw a strange sight. The speed of his flying swords was extremely fast, but the distance between them was gradually increasing. This was obviously due to the gods and devils as they created a world. The speed at which space was expanding surpassed the movement speed of the flying swords. Boom! Suddenly, the space shook violently and the mountains stopped growing. The space stabilized. The flying swords came whooshing over, and Qin Mu raised his hand. The flying swords collided and transformed into a sword pellet, which spun in the air. He let out a sigh of relief and looked around. He could no longer see Sanghua and the rest. There was an extreme number of mountains in the surroundings, but they weren't especially high. They were like the mountains in the outside world, but shrunk over 10 times. Qin Mu sliced a chunk of rock and examined it in detail. He then crushed it into powder. Moments later, the rock turned into fine rune markings, which gave off their final glow before dispersing with the wind and vanishing completely. They are indeed not real. Qin Mu straightened his back and looked around. The mountains which stretched up and down into the distance should have been materialized by Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter using runes. Their abilities didn't seem to have reached the level where they could create real matter. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice boomed as though it was thunder from outer space. In battles of life and death, there are no rules. This sand table will be their battlegrounds, and each side will have 10 people in total. The side that comes out victorious will be the winner. How is this suggestion? Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Sand table. He raised his head to look toward the source of the voice, and saw Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter's incomparably huge faces beyond the sky. They looked like planets in outer space. This means that even though the plaza looks countless times larger, it should still be the same from the outside. Qin Mu was endlessly astonished. This kind of thing was simply beyond his imagination. Upon coming, he had already calculated the size of the plaza. It had a palace on each side. They were most likely located in the left yin and the right yang. Qin Mu had walked all the way down the main road, then went up the steps to enter the plaza. It was not even 100 yards in width, and had a length of 150 yards. Both sides had steps which led to the palaces beside. If one looked down from the sky, the two palaces and plaza would present the divinatory diagram from Li divinatory trigrams. So Li fire was born. Now, the interior space of the plaza had been expanded numerous times, but to the outside world, it still looked 150 by 100 yards. It was still the divinatory diagram, from Li divinatory trigram, with the two big palace halls. To Saint Woodcutter, Fu Riluo, Pang Yu, and the rest of the gods and devils, Qin Mu was located on a small sand table. All of his movements could be clearly seen like the markings on the palm. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. Now he had two roads to take. One road was to retreat back to the side of the big palace hall, and continue to use Li fire to refine his swords. The other road was to head to the center of the sand table world. That place was where Saint Woodcutter and Fu Riluo's spear were. Instead of searching around, it would be better to go somewhere where everyone knew others would head to. As long as they were smart, they would realize that the first to reach the place where the axe and spear crossed would have the upper hand. That was because being a step earlier would allow them to set up traps and formations while waiting for others to deliver themselves. I refined 316 swords, that's enough for me. Qin Mu moved, swiftly increasing his speed to rush toward the center of the sand table world. Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs were executed to their extreme, and he became as fast as flowing light. Boom! His speed surpassed sound, and the wall of air in front of him exploded like a white cloud. Vapor brushed his face as he passed through it. At that moment, Qin Mu heard loud explosions and looked in the direction of the noise. Figures in the distance had also broken through the speed of sound and left behind vapor clouds among the mountains. The circular vapor clouds gradually spread out in an extremely eye-catching manner. There were a total of 19 clouds, and they betrayed 19 experts, with incomparably powerful corporeal bodies surpassing the speed of sound at the same time. It was evident that they had all realized that if they were a step earlier than the others in reaching the place where the axe and the spear crossed, they would be at a great advantage and hold the upper hand. Veins popped on Qin Mu's head. Only now did he realize that he was the slowest among the 20 people in the sand table world. Even Sang Hua's speed was actually a bit faster than his. The 19 experts were all people who were equivalent to young true gods. The techniques they cultivated allowed their bodies to reach a height that surpassed Qin Mu. Just like that, the speed that Qin Mu was so proud of finally lost to experts on the same realm. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped and turned to leave. Everyone was heading to where the axe and the spear crossed, so that place would be the most dangerous place instead. Everyone couldn't shake each other off in speed, so the result of running there would be a collision of 20 divine arts practitioners. In the end, it would become a huge and messy brawl. In such a chaotic situation, it was easy for accidents to happen. Even if he possessed better abilities, he could be surrounded and killed. Since it was like that, he might as well not go there. The next moment, the 19 figures that were rushing toward the place where the axe and spear crossed suddenly turned invisible and vanished. He couldn't see where they went. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and his expression became grim. The ones that have survived for so long in Supreme Emperor Heaven are indeed not stupid, and have all thought of the same thing. Interesting, I've finally met my match. In that case, I won't look for you guys, but will wait for you to find me. His body suddenly broke through the air and sprinted straight to the borders of the sand table world. Over there was a wall of fire that was dozens of miles high, and the burning palace hall formed the wall between Li Fire and the Devil Fire. After a moment, the sound of iron being beaten came from the sand table world. It could be heard 10 miles away. In no time, Qin Mu saw the first person coming over. It was an alluring girl with a graceful posture. The 10 divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven are all powerful, but you're the weak link. The alluring girl looked at Qin Mu's back and giggled. I don't have the confidence to deal with the other people, so I could only come to take the first credit. Sister. Qin Mu turned his head to give her a radiant smile. You might have stubbed your toe on a hard rock. The waist of the alluring woman was soft as though it was a willow branch in the wind. She swayed left and right as she walked toward Qin Mu and chuckled. How tough could you be? I've seen it just now that your speed is the slowest. Even though it isn't much slower, it showed that your corporeal body's attainments are slightly inferior. But even a slight difference is a world of difference in abilities. Her feet stopped just right before the flying swords that were hidden in a circle around him. The flying swords that Qin Mu had put underground were the first form of sword picture, sword treading mountains and rivers. The girl just needed to step forward, and sword treading mountains and rivers would activate, shredding her apart. She would become a bloody waterfall in the picture of mountains and rivers. However, for her feet to stop just before the trap, she should have noticed that something was wrong. The corner of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and he praised. How smart. Good sister, what's your name? My name is Tapo Shangyun, and I'm the disciple of true devil Qian Tapo. The woman was bewildered by his actions though. When the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven meet the devils, they always shout at us angrily and never smile. How could you be one of them, calling me good sister the moment you meet me? If all of the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven were like you, I wouldn't have to kill so many divine arts practitioners. I'm actually curious, what is your background? Qin Mu opened his mouth to answer, but Tapo Shangyun stomped her feet that moment. The ground trembled, and flying swords instantly broke into the surface. Qin Mu's face changed slightly, and he raised his hand to grab them. All of the flying swords gathered in his palm, and turned into a sword pellet that was about to land in his hand. While he was retrieving his sword, Tapo Shangyun rushed forward at a speed that was no slower than that of his flying swords. Before Qin Mu's sword pellet was even formed, spider legs appeared behind the woman's back and stabbed forward, scattering the sword pellet apart. The woman was incomparably smart, and her spider legs attacked like the storm, breaking the sword pellet to not give Qin Mu any chance. You're truly the weakest one, and I shall claim the first blood. Tapo Shangyun burst into soft laughter as 2 incomparably sharp bone spikes appeared in her hands. She stabbed them toward Qin Mu's chest. Eh? Just as she did so, she felt that something was wrong. She saw Qin Mu's smile becoming stiff and falling down into a pool of ink. But he was not the only one to change. Even the Li Fire and the Devil Fire behind him also turned into ink. Tapo Shangyun hurriedly looked back and saw herself in a frame. Outside it, another Qin Mu was walking calmly toward her. Only then did she realize that she had entered a painting when she was pouncing at him. This is a painting. How could a drawing move and even speak? How did I not see any flaws? Tapo Shangyun was astonished. She leaped up, wanting to jump out of the painting, but she remained trapped inside. Everything was blank besides the ink on the ground that was yet to dry. The woman hissed, and the 8 claws behind her back stabbed ruthlessly toward the outside. Kai, 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 the spider legs pierced through the painting, and Tapo Shangyun was delighted. She wanted to tear apart the painting and jump out. Yet at this moment, Qin Mu blew a mouthful of air, and the painting fluttered away, landing in a wall of fire that was in that direction. In the thick Li fire and devil fire, miserable shrieks could be heard as the painting burned into ashes. They formed the shape of a spider lady who was still struggling. In time, she collapsed in the flames and there was no more movement. Sister Shangyun, I would have liked it very much to have a fair fight with you, but there are too many experts, and I have to save my stamina for stronger opponents, Qin Mu said apologetically. You are indeed very strong, but you are still not my opponent. Suddenly, the ground under Qin Mu's feet rose up and threw him high up. A giant's footprint appeared in the moving ground, and the moment Qin Mu was kicked up, incomparably sharp stone spikes shot out from the ground toward him. While he was in mid-air, his sword pellet came flying over and countless flying swords spiraled to shred all the stone spikes. When he was about to locate the enemy's position, the ground exploded once more, and a huge hand formed from magma grabbed at him. Qin Mu punched down. With a loud explosion, a huge volcano rose up and erupted. The power of the punch was instantly increased drastically. The punch and the huge hand collided, and the magma rocks instantly shattered. They flew in random directions and tumbled continuously to gather together once more to form a palm. It closed into a fist as devil fire burned in the places between the rocks. The magma giant from Heavenly Devil Horde. When Qin Mu was up, his arm was almost broken. He looked down only to see the ground trembling violently. A Heavenly Devil Horde transformed into the shape of magma to break out of the earth. When this person landed on the ground, he roared loudly, and Qin Mu's body that was in mid-air was struck by sound waves which had materialized. They pushed him into the wall of fire. Weakly. This video will end here.